Welcome to another deep dive. We are really thrilled to have you joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a heavy one today.
It really is. I mean, if you've been following global security trends, you already know the nature of conflict is evolving. But today, we aren't just skimming the headlines of the current cyberkinetic conflict. We're really we're getting into the architecture of the attacks.
Right, the actual mechanics of it.
Exactly. Our mission for this deep dive is to look at the exact mechanics of a nationwide 60-hour internet blackout. We'll look at the realities of asymmetric proxy swarms and, this is the crazy part, what happens when explosive military drones actually meet commercial cloud servers.
It's a totally new frontier.
It is. We are breaking down how modern warfare has fundamentally shifted into the digital realm, and we're going to explore the profound implications of this new reality with you. So, to guide us through this, we're working with a really compelling stack of source material today.
Really detailed stuff.
Yeah, we have a recent intelligence briefing alongside a comprehensive analytical breakdown published on a Patreon page called KULT. These sources detailed a rapidly escalating cyber and kinetic warfare between the U.S.-Israeli coalition and Iran. And honestly, the events outlined in this brief, they read like a near-future thriller.
They do, but it's important to remember this represents a very real, very present shift in how nations wage war. And before we get into the tactical specifics of these operations, we need to establish the analytical framework for our discussion.
Definitely.
As always, our commitment on this deep dive is strict neutrality. The source material covers highly sensitive, ongoing geopolitical and military conflicts involving the United States, Israel, and Iran.
Right.
So our role today is just to impartially report on the events, the military actions, the cyber strategies, and the political figures mentioned in the briefing. We're going to examine both the U.S.-Israeli actions and the Iranian perspectives without taking any sides and without endorsing any of the viewpoints or justifications provided by the actors involved.
Absolutely. Our singular objective is just to help you understand the mechanics and the broader strategic implications of what is actually being reported.
Yeah.
We are strictly here for the facts and the structural analysis of those facts.
Exactly.
So to put the sheer scale of this conflict into perspective, I want you to consider this data point from the briefing. Just picture picking up your phone, trying to pull up a map or send a message, and finding that your entire country's internet bandwidth has suddenly plummeted to somewhere between 1% and 4% of its normal operating capacity.
1 to 4%. That's essentially nothing.
Nothing. We are talking about a highly coordinated, systemic degradation of connectivity affecting over 90 million people simultaneously.
Yeah, a total throttling of a nation's digital infrastructure to that degree is just a staggering logistical achievement. It completely redefines the concept of a communications blackout for the 21st century.
Okay, let's unpack this. According to the KULT briefing, the spark for this unprecedented digital event occurred on February 28th. The United States and Israel launched two coordinated operations. They were designated Operation Epic Fury and Operation Roaring Lion.
Right, the initial strike.
Yeah, and this wasn't a traditional military campaign that just, threw in a few cyber elements as an afterthought. The cyber operations were deployed simultaneously with the kinetic, physical attacks from the very first minute. So how does a dual-front operation like that actually function in practice?
Well, the simultaneous deployment is really the defining characteristic of modern multi-domain warfare. U.S. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, actually offered a highly revealing quote about the underlying strategy here.
What did he say?
He stated that these were coordinated operations in space and cyberspace designed to disrupt communications and sensor networks within Iran. But the objective he outlined is what we really should focus on.
Okay.
General Kane explicitly stated the goal was to leave the adversary disturbed, disoriented, and confused.
Disturbed, disoriented, and confused.
Exactly. They were weaponizing the sudden, total absence of information. In a military context, if a commander cannot communicate with their units, or if early warning radar data can't reach headquarters because the network is severed, the defense grid essentially collapses.
It's force paralysis. And the network data regarding the execution of that strategy is just absolute. Both NetBlocks and Cloudflare, which monitor global internet routing and connectivity, reported that Iran's internet dropped to that 1% to 4% threshold.
Right.
And it remained suppressed at that level for more than 60 hours.
60 hours is a lifetime in the digital age.
It really is. For 90 million people, a 60-hour blackout means digital banking ceases to function. Supply chains freeze because logistics software can't update. Point-of-sale systems and grocery stores fail. Families have no reliable way to verify the safety of relatives in neighboring provinces.
Just put yourself in that position for a moment. Waking up to a total severing of the social and economic nervous system of your environment, it isn't a more inconvenience. It induces immediate, widespread societal paralysis.
Yeah.
But the tactical genius of this operation is that the U.S. and Israeli forces didn't simply create a void. They systematically filled the silence they manufactured.
Yes, the sources detail this incredible secondary phase to the operation. While the internet was effectively throttled into non-existence, the briefing notes that Israeli forces hijacked Iranian state broadcasting channels.
They took over the TV.
They literally overrode the terrestrial television signals and began broadcasting pre-recorded speeches from U.S. President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Wow.
And these hijacked broadcasts were directly urging Iranian civilians to initiate an uprising against their regime.
It is a textbook application of modern psychological warfare and executed flawlessly on a technical level. The strategy requires isolating a population by severing their peer-to-peer communication, their internet and mobile networks.
Right, cut them off from each other.
Exactly. Once the population is digitally isolated, you forcefully dominate the traditional centralized broadcast mediums that remain operational. You essentially force the population into a sensory deprivation chamber, and then you ensure your messaging is the only voice capable of penetrating that chamber.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The Iranian retaliation detailed in the briefing did not attempt to mirror the centralized, top-down nature of the U.S.-Israeli strike.
They went a completely different route.
They really did. The reaction took a highly distributed, decentralized form. According to threat intelligence data from Palo Alto Network's Unit 42, more than 60 pro-Iranian hacktivist groups mobilized within hours of the initial operations.
What's fascinating here is the rapid deployment of what military analysts call an asymmetric swarm. Iran didn't respond by trying to match high-end cyber commands blow for blow in a conventional manner.
They couldn't.
Right, so they unleashed a decentralized network of proxies. And the target selection of this swarm really reveals their strategic intent. The briefing specifically highlights a prominent group known as Handala, which intelligence assessments link directly to Iran's Ministry of Intelligence.
And what did Handala do?
They immediately claimed responsibility for penetrating an Israeli energy company, Jordanian fuel systems, and critical Israeli payment infrastructure.
So they bypassed military targets entirely and went straight for the daily utilities and the economic arteries.
Exactly.
And the collateral damage extended into pure surveillance and data destruction as well. The sources cite a report from Checkpoint Software detailing how hackers linked to this Iranian swarm successfully compromised surveillance camera networks. And this wasn't isolated to Israel. They breached camera systems in Qatar and Bahrain, too.
The intelligence gathering implications of that are severe, obviously, but the psychological impact is equally potent. Knowing your adversary has administrative access to the cameras monitoring your commercial districts and residential streets, it creates an ambient level of terror. Totally. Furthermore, the Israeli National Cybersecurity Directorate, the NCD, tracked a widespread wave of data destruction attacks impacting multiple domestic sectors. And this is a crucial distinction. The swarm wasn't utilizing ransomware to extort money.
Right, they didn't want to pay out.
And they weren't merely conducting espionage to steal secrets either.
They were utilizing wiper malware. Hackers were leveraging stolen credentials to actively wipe systems, essentially scorching the digital earth behind them.
That is the defining feature of a wiper attack. The goal is unrecoverable sabotage. By destroying the data, they aim to inflict maximum friction on the domestic economy. And this shows the paradigm for you, the listener.
How so?
Well, we frequently discuss cyber warfare as an abstract concept, state intelligence agencies hacking other state intelligence servers in classified facilities. But this asymmetric swarm utilized everyday credentials. They used the passwords of mid-level managers at logistics firms, utility contractors, payment processors, just to dismantle civilian services. The front line of this conflict runs directly through the commercial digital tools that society relies upon to function.
That's a really chilling thought. And the source material also documents a specific escalation where the digital and physical domains violently intersected. Analysts are pointing to this as a stark first in modern warfare.
This specific event forces a total reevaluation of the physical architecture supporting our digital lives. Society tends to conceptualize the cloud as an ethereal, untouchable entity.
Right, it's just floating up there.
But in reality, the cloud is incredibly physical. It exists on the ground, inside massive, power-hungry industrial facilities known as data centers.
And according to the KULT analysis, Iranian Shahed 136 drones were deployed to physically strike 3 Amazon Web Services, or AWS, data centers.
AWS commercial servers.
Yes. 2 of these commercial cloud facilities were located in the United Arab Emirates, and 1 was in Bahrain. We are looking at a scenario where explosive military hardware was deliberately flown into commercial server farms to permanently take them offline. So what does the physical reality of a drone strike on a facility like that entail?
Well, a Shahed 136 carries a substantial explosive payload. When it impacts a commercial data center, it isn't just taking a few servers offline. The kinetic explosion compromises the structural integrity of the facility, destroys the localized power grid, and critically, it severs the cooling systems.
And without cooling,
Even if servers survive the initial blast, they will rapidly overheat and shut down without industrial cooling. They essentially melt themselves.
that's incredible.
The immediate fallout was severe. These AWS centers host the digital infrastructure for the entire region. The strikes caused cascading failures in banking networks, payment processing systems, and delivery logistics for millions of residents across the Gulf.
The justification provided for targeting commercial infrastructure is incredibly broad, too. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps quickly claimed responsibility for the strikes. Fars, the Iranian news agency, reported the IRGC's rationale, stating that these specific AWS facilities were actively supporting U.S. military and intelligence operations.
And that rationale really highlights the inherent vulnerability of dual-use infrastructure. Major cloud providers like AWS host millions of commercial clients, streaming services, retail databases, hospital records, right alongside massive government and defense contracts.
They're all in the same physical building.
Exactly. When military forces decide that hosting a government contract makes a civilian data center a legitimate target, any commercial entity sharing that server farm becomes acceptable collateral damage.
And if we look at the geography of these strikes, the UAE and Bahrain, there is a massive economic context to consider here.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the economic ripple effect is profound. The briefing incorporates reporting from Fortune magazine, which emphasizes that these kinetic strikes occurred at a deeply sensitive moment for the Gulf region. Both the UAE and Bahrain have been aggressively courting international tech investments.
Right, they want to be tech capitals.
They're pouring billions into sovereign wealth initiatives with the explicit ambition of transforming the region into a global hub for artificial intelligence.
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult to pitch global investors on building a centralized AI hub if the commercial data centers required to train those AI models are actively being targeted by explosive drone strikes on a random Tuesday.
It threatens the foundation of their entire long-term economic strategy. It sends a chilling message to multinational technology firms. Your data architecture might be secured by elite encryption and top-tier cybersecurity teams, but is the physical warehouse containing your servers hardened against a kinetic military assault?
Probably not.
Exactly. The line delineating civilian commercial infrastructure from legitimate military targets has been completely erased.
So what does this all mean? We've examined the mechanics of a nationwide internet throttle, the widespread deployment of destructive wiper malware by proxy swarms, and the unprecedented use of kinetic drones against commercial cloud servers. Where does the tactical evolution of this conflict head next?
It's shifting focus.
Yeah, according to the source material, it's pivoting heavily toward the individual. It is becoming an aggressively psychological war.
The propaganda and psychological operations we are observing are rapidly integrating advanced commercial technologies. The battle to control the public narrative and manipulate civilian behavior is being fought with the exact same intensity as the battle to control the digital networks.
The briefing actually details a highly unconventional countermeasure deployed by Israel's National Cybersecurity Directorate. The NCD released an AI-generated video specifically engineered as psychological counter-warfare.
I saw this. It's fascinating.
The video publicly mocked Iranian hacking units. It depicted fictional Iranian military commanders acting visibly frustrated and enraged because their phishing attempts were continually being identified and ignored by highly educated, wary Israeli citizens.
Observing a state intelligence agency utilize AI-generated deepfakes to publicly taunt an adversary's cyber command is just a surreal milestone in statecraft. However, when you analyze the threat data the NCD released in conjunction with that video, their intense focus on public psychology and civilian awareness becomes completely logical.
The volume of these attacks is intense. The NCD reported recording over 1,300 Pacific instances of Iranian psychological warfare attempts since the conflict escalated. And the most critical data point in the report is that an overwhelming 77% of those attempts were phishing attacks.
77%.
Yes. These were operations specifically designed to extract personal information and access credentials from everyday civilians.
That metric is the crux of the issue. We analyze complex routing protocol manipulations, asymmetric wiper deployments, and kinetic drone strikes on AWS servers. Yet, Yossi Karati, the director of the NCD, issued a stark warning based on this phishing data. He stated, "This surge underscores that organizations of all types, large and small, can be exposed to this kind of attack."
It's the ultimate equalizer in cybersecurity. You can invest billions in satellite defense networks and deploy elite cyber commands to monitor the national energy grid. But if an operations manager at a mid-sized shipping company receives a highly personalized, perfectly crafted email claiming their AWS billing has failed,
And they click that link in a moment of panic.
exactly, the adversary bypasses all of those high-tech defenses entirely.
Human psychology consistently remains the most exploitable vulnerability in billion-dollar cyber conflicts. If an operative can socially engineer a human being into voluntarily handing over their administrative credentials, they don't need to develop sophisticated zero-day exploits to breach a firewall.
They just ask for the keys.
They simply unlock the front door and walk in. And the sheer volume of these operations, over 1,300 tracked attempts, demonstrates that this isn't a highly targeted spear phishing campaign aimed exclusively at military generals. It is a widespread dragnet designed to compromise anyone, anywhere, to establish a foothold inside domestic networks.
We've covered immense ground today, dissecting a conflict fought simultaneously in orbit, across national internet protocols, in the physical airspace with explosive drones, and directly inside the email inboxes of the civilian population.
Synthesizing the intelligence provided in these sources, the primary theme is undeniable. Modern warfare operates entirely without boundaries. The historical distinction between an active military battlefield and the civilian home front has been completely dissolved by our absolute reliance on digital interconnectedness. The analysts at the Center for Strategic and International Studies provided a deeply sobering assessment in this briefing. They noted that the digital domain is exactly where Iran's asymmetric response will continue to manifest. They warn that the operations initiated on February 28th are more likely to mark the beginning of a new phase of cyber escalation than its conclusion.
It isn't the finale of a conflict. It's the establishment of a volatile new baseline. We've explored the architecture of a 90 million person digital blackout, the deployment of proxy hacktivist swarms, and the deeply personal nature of AI-driven psychological warfare. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over on your own as you go about your day. If major commercial cloud providers and data centers, the literal physical backbone of our everyday digital lives, our modern banking infrastructure, our logistics networks, and our basic communications are now openly targeted by kinetic military drone strikes, how does that fundamentally rewrite the rules of global business? And perhaps more importantly, how does it force us to reevaluate our own personal, absolute reliance on the cloud being available whenever we need it?
It's a question we all need to be asking ourselves right now.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of modern conflict. We hope this analysis helped you cut through the noise to clearly understand the mechanics and gravity of these events. Keep questioning the information around you, keep looking for the bigger picture, and we will catch you on the next one.